and welcome to Covey Fabrics DIY channel. My name is Amy and I'm visiting you today from Artisan Upholstery Studio right here on YouTube. Today I'm going to create a ruffle skirt for an antique chair, and it's going to give it a French country look that's really popular right now. I'm starting with this antique chair. It's already beautiful, but we're going to add some country charm with this tapestry and this chenille fabric. So I'm measuring the seat side to side and front to back because I'm going to cut a square of fabric to lay over top of that seat. This isn't a reupholstery job. I'm simply making a little slip cover with a skirt to fit over that seat. Nice and easy. So here I've got my square of fabric, and I'm just going to lay it on top of the chair so that I can cut it into a round shape instead of the square shape. And I'm going to start by taking some chalk and drawing out the round shape of the chair. And I'm using that double piping as my guide to get a nice clean line around the entire chair. So we are going to have to make some cuts around these wooden supports. So I'm going to cut down the center line toward the center of that post, and then I'm going to cut a V shape to either side of that wood. And I'm going to do the same to the back support here. So I'm cutting it right down the center toward the wood and then V'ing it off on either side. So here we have a better view of what I'm doing and the angles. So it's straight down the center and then to either side of that post. That allows the fabric to just pull through those openings and lay flat so that we can continue drawing our chalk line. I'm going to trim off these pieces here around the posts, leaving a 1/2 inch allowance so that I can stitch that closed and not have it be a raw edge. I'm only going to do one side so that I can make it a perfect mirror to the other side. And I am cutting a 1/2 inch beyond that chalk line to give me a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm finding my chalk lines on the other side so that I can make it a perfect mirrored shape so that it's even all the way around. So this is an optional step. You can serge the edge just to make it a little bit stronger. This fabric does not fray terribly, so it's not completely necessary, but I just wanted to show you an additional thing that you can do to strengthen the fabric. I'm going to stitch these closed, so just the openings around the wood rails of the chair. So just the 4 little openings there, I'm going to stitch them at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, just to close up that raw edge. So I'm laying it back on the chair just to see and make sure that everything fits. You can see at the front that it's not to the shape of the chair, so it either needs little pleats or a gather around the entire front edge. So I'm going to gather it, and the way I do that is by loosening the tension on my sewing machine and just making a stitch around the front of the panel here. And you want to leave your threads nice and long so that you can pull the loose edge, the bottom edge, and it'll give you a nice gather around the whole front of the chair. So you just want to take one of those threads and pull it so that you can gather it. So it's important that the tension be very loose on that thread to get the gather to be nice and easy to do. So I'm going to do a 6-inch skirt now, and the length of that skirt is going to be 36, and I have to triple that measurement. So it'll be 108 in the end, which is basically 2 strips at 7 inches high. So the length of the fabric is 54, which means 2 will make 108, which is triple the length of a 36-inch frame. So the 7 inches is because you need a 1/2 inch on either side for the seam allowance. So I'm going to sew these together. And now I'm going to just sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the bottom edge. And you can serge it before you do this if you want, but this isn't a fabric that frays terribly, so I think I'm going to be okay just stitching it closed. And that's what it looks like. So on the other side, I'm going to use my loose stitch again. Lots of free tension there. And you're going to run a stitch down the entire length of that skirt panel and leave your threads nice and long. And that allows you to pull the bottom thread, the loose thread, to get that gather in. This might take a little bit of time, and so what I'm doing is I'm working from one side first to the center, and then I'm going back and starting from the other side to the center again. So I have my full skirt now, and I can start attaching it to the main panel. So there's going to be some adjustments necessary. This isn't going to be a perfect length, it's kind of approximate, so I'm finding the center and just stapling it to the center of that main panel, and that just gives me a good idea of how much I need to pull on either side to make that skirt fit nicely. And I'm just stitching that right to the panel. Nothing fancy, just take your time. Make sure everything stays nice and straight. So testing it on the chair, I think that looks like a cute little height for that skirt. Ruffles nicely, lays nice and straight. So now we have to do the back portions. So I've got 3 pieces for those next portions. I just did exactly the same thing. So now I'm going to make little ties out of this nice rustic looking twine. And I'm just going to put each little tie into the skirt at the end, just tucking it in nice. And I don't have a reverse on my sewing machine, so I'm going to go over it a couple of times just to make sure that it's nice and tight. And I'm also going to sew the skirt closed at the edges. So now I can just go ahead and tie these ties and put that skirt on. So now I'm going to make a little cushion pad for the back because the fabrics don't match, and I have enough to do that so that they will match. So I'm just cutting 2 panels approximate to the size of the back, and I'm going to taper the bottoms because the chair is tapered at the bottom, and I just want to match that look to make it look custom. So I'm measuring for my ruffle. I've got 70 inches, so I'm going to triple that for the measurement. Now, this fabric is very thick, so I'm going to have to do the same thing with just that 1/2 inch edge. But if you have a lighter fabric like this nice light cotton, what you would do is you would actually double it over and you would press that closed and you just stitch along the bottom edge for your gather, along here for your gather, and it's exactly the same process, but it's doubled up instead of just single. So I'm making these 3.5 inches wide instead of 7 because I think that the back should be a little bit narrower for the ruffle. At the bottom edge here, I'm just going to overlap the ruffle and then I can trim off the extra, just like that. I'm attaching the second panel and you're going to have to sew it by pulling it nice and tight, and I'm leaving the bottom open so I can fill it with some padding. But because that ruffle has created a bit of a gather on the panel itself, I'm just pulling it nice and tight to get them to match up. So we can add some of those rustic ties to the top corners so that I can attach this to the chair. Now, because this is more of a cover than a cushion, I'm just using flat batting to fill it up. It doesn't have to be too puffy. In fact, it shouldn't be too puffy. I want it to be fairly flat, so I'm just using a tiny amount of the batting to fill up this pad. And I'm going to stitch it closed along the bottom. So here's our finished French country chair. It's very feminine. It's just adorable. I love the ruffles. They worked out really well with that gathering technique. Really happy with these rustic ties. I think it just adds a lot of charm to a kind of boring antique chair. Very cute for spring. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.